Hello, everybody, and welcome in to Speaking Steagles, the premier Pennsylvania pro football podcast. I am Nick Vete. He's Ricardo Martinez-Paz. The Super Bowl has come and gone. We are on, not quite yet, according to the NFL's calendar, but in our books, we are on the 2024-2025 of the NFL season, and we've got plenty to talk about, both with the Steelers and Eagles. We're going to break it all down. And just get back to talking Steagles, because it's been a little bit since we've last done that. A lot's happened, so we are going to dive right into it. But before we do any of that, Ricardo, I ask you, how you doing today, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing well, man. Glad we're back doing these episodes at least every other week. It was a nice break, but I've definitely been waiting and wanting to talk Steagles again, because there's been a couple notable things that have already happened so far. But how are you doing, man?
Yeah, no, I'm doing good, man. Happy to be back talking. We don't have any real major updates right now, but it's definitely that time of the year where you've got, different types of news happening in different degrees. And now we get to kind of break it down before we really get into the nitty gritty of it in a couple of weeks with free agency. And then all of a sudden the draft sneaks up on you. So yeah, I'm excited to be back talking about it. And, I guess one thing we can kind of start off with before we dive into the Steelers or Eagles. I know we were just talking about where we wanted to start, but I mean, let's talk about the Super Bowl for 5 minutes before we dive into it. I mean, what'd you make of the game? What'd you make of the outcome? I mean, is this Chiefs dynasty, here to stay? I don't know. What'd you make of everything that kind of went into the big game? I was at home watching it after a ski race, and it came down to the wire. I don't think you could really ask for more. I know you were obviously rooting for the Chiefs, and I was pulling a bit more for the 49ers,
Yeah.
but what'd you make of the game?
So let me just set the scene a little bit here. So I was at my uncle's house, and another one of my uncles is a Chiefs fan. So him and his entire family come dressed in all Chiefs attire, and I'm like, you know what? Hell yeah, we love that. I'm gonna hop on just for this one game. And the game itself, I mean, the first half was, turnover filled, kind of boring. But I mean, it was, after that first half, I feel like it definitely got way better. And I don't know if you want to touch on the halftime performance at all, but it kind of exceeded my expectations just a little bit. I'll say the roller skating, that was kind of cool. Like that, it was definitely an unexpected thing. I kind of wish Usher had like sung a couple other songs, but I thought it was pretty cool. But I don't know if you have an opinion on that at all.
Well, I actually like the halftime show. Now I'll be candid for you, and I'll set the scene a little bit. So I came back from the ski race. It was our last race of the year. As you know, last year we were both at school. The last race of the year, things get kind of nuts because our team clinched the division title for the third year in a row. So I got back and we started celebrating a little bit. Didn't really pay much attention to the halftime show at the time when it was going on. And just to kind of put it in perspective, I had to rewatch the Super Bowl highlights the next day to kind of re-grasp everything that happened. I was aware of everything that was going on, but I had to rewatch the highlights just to jog my memory a little bit. So, I watched the halftime show. I'm a big halftime show guy. I like it a lot. Yeah. And I actually like this one a lot too. I'm not a big Usher guy, so I didn't really like the song selection was kind of here nor there for me. But as far as just the actual show goes, I actually enjoyed it a lot. I thought that the guests that he brought out were all added a lot to the show, but didn't take it over. Because that's my biggest pet peeve is when you have a headliner of a halftime show, and then you just have these special guests that kind of take the whole thing over. I mean, point blank is like Coldplay from a couple years ago. Yeah. When I think it was Bruno Mars and maybe it was Beyonce both came out after having both already done their own halftime show. It kind of watered the whole thing down for me. But this one I felt like all the guests kind of added to it. And overall to me, it was a very good show. Wasn't groundbreaking or fantastic, but very solid, very good.
Yeah, no, I would have to agree with that. I mean, people are saying it's better than last year's, like Rihanna's, and I mean, I don't know. People have their own opinions, and
I could go there. I could go there. I haven't really put it into my rankings yet, but I could go there with it better being. It's interesting to think back to like the last 5 halftime show where I would slot it in, but I really haven't thought about it in that perspective yet.
Yeah, no, me neither. My brother was like, "Yeah, maybe this is better than Rihanna's," but I'm like, that's an interesting take. But as for the rest of the game, I mean, it was just crazy, just the how this went into overtime, and I mean, some of the again more fumbles and again, just Mahomes showing that he's clutch, and it just, dude, they're inevitable, man. Like I'm glad they won, but like it just you knew as soon as Kyle Shanahan took the ball in the first overtime. I mean, and to receive in overtime, like you just had a feeling, especially after that. Yeah, the third down, the third and four that they didn't get and kick the field goal. You just knew the Chiefs were going to go down and win the game in the end. But I mean, people are blasting Kyle Shanahan, and initially I kind of was, but when you look a lot deeper into the analytics, and it really is a coin toss on the outcome of whether you receive it or you kick it first. Like it's one of
Yeah.
those things where it just kind of depends on what the analytics department says. The Chiefs wanted the ball second, and so obviously the Mahomes reaction for the Niners wanting to receive the ball first was just like him trying not to be like, "Oh my god, like they want the ball,
Yeah.
like we're getting it second, like that's what
And
they
again, I
wanted."
mean, that's kind of what came out, and that's what's kind of inexcusable to me is the fact that some of the players didn't know the rules. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
understand that Kyle Shanahan, the way that he kind of explained it away with his logic on why he wanted the ball first, it's like, okay, like that's fine. But I mean, it's like it's inexcusable for the entire team to not know exactly what the plan was should that,
yeah,
overtime situation arise. And credit to the Chiefs because they said after it that they had practice situations like that should it arise in the playoffs where the game goes to overtime and, what's the strategy behind it. All of the players have, claimed that they knew exactly what they wanted to do should the game go to OT.
yeah. I mean, that's just from the very, I mean, from such an early period. I mean, obviously the odds of it going to overtime are slim, but like you still have to be
Yeah.
prepared for every single situation. And I mean, clearly the Chiefs were more prepared for it, were well coached for it. They knew what they wanted, and that's kind of why they won the game. And you kind of argue, you can make the argument that Kyle Shanahan probably could have run the ball on third down, or maybe gone for it on fourth to have to force the Chiefs to I mean, the Chiefs said they were gonna. If the Niners had scored a touchdown, the Chiefs said they were gonna go for two, and try and win the game. But still, it's just like all these hypotheticals are just magnified in the biggest game on the biggest stage. It's just
Yeah.
when one coach was just ready for it, the other wasn't. So yeah, but I'm glad the Chiefs won, man. Man, I just I do feel the slightest bit bad for the Niners because this is probably their best team that's they've had in years, even though they've
Yeah.
been so consistent. It's just, yeah, I don't know, Mahomes inevitable and
Yeah.
Andy
And
Reid, and like
I mean,
it's
it's tough, man.
better.
My biggest takeaway, I was watching the game on the bus ride home in the first half, and I mean, it just felt like the Niners were kind of all over the Chiefs, whether it was on the defensive side of the ball, coming up with stops, or they were moving the ball so well on offense. But it's like the turnovers really felt like what really, came to bite them in the butt. And I mean, you look at last year's game, it was a very well clean, well played game. The one big turnover was that Jalen Hurts fumble last year, which
Yeah,
obviously is kind of etched in Eagles fans' minds. That was so costly in that one game. In this game, the ball was being turned over left and right, on the biggest stage, which was kind of shocking to me, just the sheer number of turnovers in this game. But it ended up being a really entertaining second half, and a lot of points were scored in the second half, which, to me kind of made the game so, gripping down the stretch. But yeah, man, I mean, it's tough for the 49ers. I mean, do I feel awful for them? No, but it's just kind of like more at this point. I'm getting like bored of the Chiefs and just their
yeah.
continued dominance.
Well, I mean, someone has to take him down. It's at some point.
Yeah.
This. It's just so hard when Mahomes and Andy Reid are on the other side. It's just they've been there and done that, and obviously going back to back for the first time in like 20 years that it's happened in the league. So like,
Well,
it's
well
just
now,
don't get it, man. They're just so good at it. They've done it so many times.
especially because this was a team that everybody was saying, oh, it's not, the same old Chiefs. They're built around their defense, and they've had so many scares throughout the season or bad losses or whatever.
Yeah,
But let me ask you this, because the talk after the game was the Chiefs players all saying that, we want to go for the three-peat. We want to go for the three-peat.
yeah,
Let me ask you this hypothetical, because it's awfully hard to win two in a row in the NFL. A three-peat is almost unheard of. What? All right, so for the rest of Patrick Mahomes' career, I believe he's 28 right now.
yeah.
Over under 4.5 rings in his career.
Over. I mean, he's already.
You're taking the over.
Yeah, I would take the over, but the only reason I wouldn't is because Andy Reid might retire soon. So I
Well,
don't know.
that's
I
the
don't think.
exact thing.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
So
there's a lot of good teams in the AFC. Their division just got a lot harder with John Harbaugh or Jim Harbaugh, excuse me, joining the Chargers. Sean Payton's still there in Denver. If he gets the quarterback situation figured out, we know he's a very capable head coach.
Yeah.
Then add in on top of the fact all the other talented quarterbacks in that conference, and the fact, like you said, that Andy Reid is probably gonna, how many more years does he really have? Travis Kelce's probably gonna retire within the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be, the talk with Tom Brady is always that he had two sort of separate careers: the first half of his career, and then kind of the rejuvenation at the end where he won a bunch more championships.
Yeah.
It's like that. It almost feels to me like it's going to be two stages of Patrick Mahomes' career, with Andy Reid and Travis Kelce and, obviously Tyreek Hill for some of the past championships. And then kind of without all those guys, and what's he going to do with the new head coach, and what's he going to do with maybe different weapons. And so I'm very curious to see how that evolution happens throughout his career. And that's why I think the number 4.5 rings is the interesting number, because it's very feasible to see him get at least one more with Andy Reid. But it's then after that, what kind of happens on the back side of his career, the back half of his career.
Yeah, but I don't think he's going to go 10 years or whatever, however long Brady did, without getting a ring. Like that's, I mean, I guess at the time, Brady also, you kind of thought it was unimaginable that, maybe Brady wouldn't go that long without another ring, but it's just Mahomes is just so talented. And I know I sound like Tony Romo and just kind of, overdoing it with Mahomes, but like he's just that good. It's just evolved so much, grown so much. And I mean, dude, as long as you have that dude at the quarterback position, I mean, you could win it any year, literally. Like
you're right, man. And let me. This will be the last kind of question I ask you on Mahomes and the Chiefs before we move back into the Steagles here. But if he retired tomorrow, where do you rank him all time in quarterbacks?
So I'm not going to do a mad dog and put him first all time. I don't think I would do that. That's Brady. I'm not crazy like that, but he would probably be top 5, right? Like he has to be.
I think I'd put him in my top 3. I think Tom Brady's my number 1, and then from there it's a toss up between him and Joe Montana. That's kind of where that's kind of what my list would be.
I think, yeah, honestly, that's top 3 makes more sense. But I mean, if Mahomes gets another, then he's definitely.
Then I think the discuss he's number 2 at that point.
Yeah, like there's really no debating it, but still, it's crazy, man, that he's won 3 at 28.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable what he's already done in just this short amount of time of his career.
Yeah, man.
The guy is. I mean, it's the way that the AFC used to be, where every year was either Ben Roethlisberger, Tom Brady, or Peyton Manning in the conference championship game, or representing the AFC was the stat, I believe. Like that's except for that one year Joe Flacco got the ring. Like that's what it feels like with this Patrick Mahomes teams. It's like every year expect him in the conference championship game. Like you're gonna have to go through the Chiefs to get to the Super Bowl. Like that's just what it feels like at this point. And so far we haven't been able to see Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen or Justin Herbert do it yet. I mean, Joe Burrow got there the one year. But that's just how it feels at this point. And the word you used, inevitable, I think sums it up really well.
Yeah, dude, it's. I mean, I guess appreciating greatness, right, as we witness it, but after a certain amount of time, you kind of want to see someone else win it. But I don't know. Everyone has their own opinions on that too. So
yes, I guess that is a good way to put it in perspective too. Is it's like we were young for the first half of Brady's career, and then he was kind of a villain to a lot of, especially me as a Steelers fan. He was a villain a lot of those years. It's like that's something that I really and we're getting really off topic here, but that's something that I really kind of sat back when especially like in high school and those first couple of years of college, really just sitting back and appreciating the greatness of LeBron James while we're watching it. Like you're watching one of the top 2 best players of all time, like in the moment, winning championships, being, at the top of his game. And it's like, we're getting the full Patrick Mahomes experience from the time he was drafted throughout his entire career. We're going to be living through it. And I mean, as love him or hate him, you got to just appreciate the greatness.
Yeah, dude. Like, when are we ever going to see this again? It's just kind of generational, almost feels like, but
Exactly.
crazy.
Not even necessarily in football, but in all of sports. So,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
that being said, let's move back into our teams, the Steelers and Eagles. We've got some news to talk about with them, and let's start with the Eagles. And unless you want to start somewhere else, I know there's some different developments that have happened with them. But to me, the big news feels like, the Haason Reddick rumors that potentially the Eagles are looking to ship him out of here before, the final season he's under contract with Philadelphia. So what do you make of this, and what's kind of your expectations of how this is going to play out?
So I listen. So he's on the final year of his 3-year deal, 3-year, $45 million contract, and as things stand, he's the 16th highest paid or 12th highest paid. I did forget the exact number. He's 16 edge rushers. Yeah, make more than him right now, and
Yeah.
this dude is like top 5 in a lot of the major stats the last few years in terms of sacks, forced fumbles, TFLs. So he certainly deserves to get paid more. And I think the Eagles should consider paying him at least, I don't know, 5 million more or something like, or actually whatever the in the top 10 money, essentially, maybe top 5. But the only downside is that he's turning 30. And I mean, at that age, you're still like,
So you're talking in the sense of an extension, correct?
yeah, I think the Eagles should extend him because, I mean, you let him walk. I mean, you let him test free agency next year, then you get nothing. Or see, that's the thing. Where it's like he's still going to be productive for the next couple of years. Like, why not get that production? Why not just keep him on the team and have him, you know, keep producing, especially with the lack of depth you have currently at the edge rushing position. I mean, you got rid of Derek Barnett midseason. You have Nolan Smith, who, he didn't really play much this past season and still fairly raw. And I don't think you're really expecting him to have a huge breakout season this coming year. And then you have Josh Sweat, obviously opposite of Haason Reddick, who, I mean, also went cold at the towards the second half of last year, but still a good edge rusher. No question about that. I'm expecting him to bounce back. Then after that, it gets really thin. I mean, you have Patrick Johnson, who's an edge rusher, really more of a special teamer, if anything. Um, Brandon Graham, he's a free agent right now. Who knows if he's going to retire? I mean, you could bring him back for a 1-year deal, but like, how much is he really going to give you? He's more of a rotational guy. I love BG, but like, he's just not going to play. You can't expect him to play a majority of the snaps, or even like 50% maybe is the best you'll get. Because that's kind of what happened this past season too. I mean, I know the Eagles signed Julian Aquara from the Lions, a former third-round pick 2020, but again, that's a very, like, you're not really going to get. He's probably not going to do much as a pass rusher. Who knows if you even keep him? I mean, his deal's worth up to 2.7 million. Like, it's just thin at the position, and it's just like edge rusher is such a premier position, and I mean, I think the Eagles should extend him, but I don't think the Eagles are going to trade him. Is my point. Like, it just doesn't make sense, and like, what are you really going to
Yeah.
get back for him? Like a first round
Well,
pick? Is that what you're expecting? Because I don't think teams are going to offer that. Like, I think you get
I
a
mean,
second at most.
that's the dilemma of, and I've been trying to read up a lot on how the contract is structured and how it all works, and some of it is confusing, and I get caught in the minutia of it a little bit. But like, to me, the crux sounds like the fact that like the Eagles paid him so little the last 2 seasons that like now the bill is kind of coming due,
Yeah.
and it's like you're obviously not going to cut him. So like that's out of the
Yeah.
realm of
No, you
possibility. His
can't.
dead cap hit would be massive,
Yeah.
and like that. So the only option would be to either keep him and play it out as this contract, to try to trade him. But then the dead or the cap hit, I believe, is still 14.8 million, even if you trade him, from what I try to
Yeah.
understand. And then the other option would be to extend him, which feels like it makes the most sense. And then you could kind of spread that money back out, and it wouldn't all kind of hit you in the 24-25 season.
Yeah, I mean exactly. So the extension makes most sense. Probably financial flexibility gives you too, especially when you need to add more depth behind Josh Sweat and Haason Reddick. So, like, and Haason Reddick himself even said, like, he kind of shut those rumors down, but he's like, I'm ready for whatever happens. It's just like,
It sounds like he wants to stay in Philadelphia.
yeah, he's from Philly. He went to
Yeah.
Temple. I mean, the dude's from, like, why would he want to leave? Like, I mean, he deserves to get paid more, sure, but I mean, he's, and there's no hometown discount whatsoever. There shouldn't be, because he's been one of the most disruptive pass rushers the last 4 seasons, even before he came to Philly. So he deserves more money. But you know what? Like,
Yeah.
Howie Roseman, I'm sure
but it does make sense why the Eagles are trying to get creative with something, because right now he's scheduled, I believe, to have the biggest cap hit of any player in this upcoming season from anyone else on the roster, which I believe would be $21.9 million.
Yeah, and so definitely. I mean, Howie's really good at restructuring deals and kind of spreading money out. So I think, he should restructure, give an extension, and if you can put it on, maybe not this season, but the season after, put that just like leave it off for the season after, and then worry about it and see where Nolan Smith is in terms of development. So that's kind of how I see it.
And I mean, it's just interesting that, like, the way that the news kind of broke that the Eagles were going about this was like they've granted him permission to seek a trade, because it made it sound like he wanted out. And then you look into it a little deeper, and he says he wants to stay. But it's like, I don't know. What do you think the most kind of feasible outcome of this is? Do you think it's that the Eagles kind of extend him for 2 or 3 more seasons after this one, and they can kind of spread the money out a bit more? I mean, by that point, you got to expect him to at least still be productive for the next. You'd imagine. I mean, he's been a top, 8, 10 to 8 pass rusher. Some seasons, top 5 pass rusher in the NFL. In these recent years with Philadelphia. That, I mean, I don't think you could expect his production to decline that much, especially like when you said you don't really know what you have outside of him. And this team was built so strongly around, getting to the quarterback when they made their Super Bowl run 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I do expect him to give him another 2 years. And spread that money out. That just, to me, makes the most sense. Then you can spend whatever money you free up on other positions of need and more depth. So I think that just makes the most sense. I hope they don't trade him. I would be really annoyed if they did, because again, you don't really, like, what are you going to get with a 2nd round pick? Like, again, you're kind of expecting Nolan Smith to then step in and bank on him to develop, like, quickly. And
it's got to be finding, because he deserves a raise, but you got to find a way to make it, worthwhile for the team. That, like, you're not, he's still not being paid, the highest amount of any player on your roster, but more than that 15 million AAV that he has, obviously that's been his contract the last 3 years.
So deserves. Well, who's the highest? I don't know if TJ's up there. He's got to be, right? TJ Watt.
I'd assume. I can look it up real quick.
But he deserves top 8 at least. Like money.
Yeah, TJ Watt has the highest cap hit. His base salary is $21 million, which is similar to what Haason Reddick would be making if the Eagles just kept his contract as currently constructed. But let me see if I can pull up his exclusive contract. And so TJ Watt's average annual salary is $25 million, and his base salary for this season is $21 million.
I mean, Haason deserves at least 20. Like, that to me seems fair.
Yeah.
But again, I think Howie will figure something out.
Yeah. And I guess it's kind of a wait and see game, but ultimately it feels like the Eagles don't really have a lot of options unless they wanted to trade him. And then it's like you said, what are you really getting back for him?
Yeah, exactly. Free agency, I'm not really. There aren't that many notable edge rushers either. So
when you get a premier edge rusher, you got to do what you can to hold on to him, because they're invaluable to teams. When a team has a game wrecker like a TJ Watt or like a Max Crosby or like a Myles Garrett, you hold on to those guys, and that's as close as the Eagles have right now with Haason Reddick.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right, so let's move into other Eagles news. So they've got the NFL announced this game in Brazil, and also, there was an extension on the Eagles coaching staff. So I'll let you kind of decide what you want to touch on first here.
I guess we can talk about Brazil, but that's because it's really. I mean, I didn't expect that at all. I don't remember if you was this talked about at any point this season, like this
That
Brazil
a
game?
game was coming to Brazil?
Yeah, was it?
No,
I don't
I had no
remember.
clue that the NFL was even planning to hold a game in Brazil. I
Yeah,
mean, they've been going kind of global. Obviously the Mexico
right.
City game that they've hosted a couple times, and they always have a presence in Europe. But yeah, no, Brazil kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah, I was just, and then also it was like, I think it was the week before Super Bowl. It might have been the start of like Super Bowl week, like the media week or whatever. And so that kind of just like threw me. I was like, whoa, and my immediate reaction was like, like I didn't really know how to feel because I just wasn't expecting it. And then like thinking about it now, it's like, yeah, you're just expanding your brand, the NFL's brand, obviously, kind of, which is fair. That's just how business is. The only like real downside I see is that the Eagles lose a
Yep.
home game, quote unquote. But like I also don't see it as that big of a downside because the Eagles had an extra home game anyway. So they're still gonna have 8 home games, because of the whole 17 games or whatever. And there's always that extra home or away game. This year just so happened to be the home game. And they can just use that for Brazil. That's fine. Like you still get 8 games of the link. Um,
Yeah.
that's where I'm like, all right, fair enough. Now the question really is like, who do they play? Who are they going to play? And obviously I texted you this. I was like, this would be interesting if the Steelers and Eagles played in Brazil week 1, first Friday game too. I don't think we said that. First opening Friday game. So I mean, here's the list of like opponents the Eagles could possibly play. So it's the Falcons, the Panthers, the Browns, the Steelers, the Packers, Jaguars, Giants, Commanders, or Cowboys. Personally, I hope it's the Steelers because
I
that
think
would
that'd
be
be
sick.
cool.
Yeah, like imagine the first game of the season. And it's just like we're facing each other. Our teams are facing each other, and it's in Brazil. It's an international game. Like I don't know, that'd be kind of sick. And it's also you kind of get a couple extra days of rest going into week 2, so mini bye, I guess. But
Yeah.
that would be sick. It was just like for our sake, that would be awesome. But there's rumors now that the Eagles could play the Browns. That came out like 2 days ago or something like that. It's like I think it was Peter King that actually said that.
Yeah.
And
It would
usually, yeah,
I mean, this is all speculation, but if if the Eagles are, obviously they're not going to make it a division opponent because those already attract obviously a large amount of fans to
yeah.
come to the stadium and everything like that. And I think the reason that I think it could probably not be the Steelers and Eagles is because obviously that's also a game that's going to get a lot of attention because it's the in-state rivalry and everything like that. And I could see them wanting to keep that in Pennsylvania as well. The Browns make sense because it's a game that, fans necessarily don't think of on the same level as a division rivalry or a rivalry against, the state, opponent. So I could see it being the Browns too. That would kind of make sense. And Peter King's pretty reliable with that. But I mean, it's hard to speculate on that now, but it would certainly just for our entertainment purposes. I would love to see it be the Steelers and Eagles playing each other in Brazil that first week.
Yeah, actually, that makes sense. The whole like interstate, like rivalry. You kind of want to keep it as that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely wouldn't be divisional because that would be it's a disadvantage for the division and the set. I don't know, but I mean,
I'd be
I also
surprised if they made it a division opponent because
yeah,
I think the
I
NFL
don't
would
think that's
prefer to
even
keep that.
happened in any international
Yeah,
game. Like
I
it
think
hasn't
that's
been a
kind of off
division.
the table. Yeah.
Probably is, but I mean, if the Eagles want to start off with a win, personally, I would rather the Falcons or Panthers because those teams aren't exactly very good, and especially the Falcons with their quarterback situation, the Panthers who are in rebuild mode. So listen, I'd be cool with that too, but Browns would be a tough one, and it's Jim Schwartz against his former team, I mean, he was the defensive coordinator when they won the Super Bowl, so that'd be kind of a
Yeah.
cool little headline there, but a little storyline. But I don't know. It'd be apparently there are a lot of Eagles fans in Brazil. I didn't know this, but their fan base is actually pretty big there. I'm just like,
Yeah.
but I don't know. That's
Yeah.
certainly one to keep an eye out for whenever the schedule's announced, which I think is it late April, May, or I can't remember. It's in
Yeah.
April.
We'll definitely touch on it when the full schedule finally does come out and they announce who the Eagles are playing.
Yeah,
But definitely a fun little first time the Eagles are going to have the first game ever from the NFL in Brazil. So it's pretty cool, and we'll keep monitoring it. But what else do you have on the Eagles here before we move over to the Steelers and talk about them a little bit?
So last thing I guess is the Eagles give Michael Clay, their special teams coordinator, an extension, multi-year. I don't actually think they announced how many years it would be, but um, rightfully so. He definitely deserved it. I mean, this year the Eagles finished first in DVOA, fifth in Pro Football Focus grading, and I mean, when you have one of the best kickers in the league and Jake Elliott, one of the best punt returners in Britton Covey, which was shocking because, I mean, before the season, we were talking who's going to be that punt returner, who's going to be that guy, especially with, the season before. It just felt like they didn't really have a set person to return punts. And Britton Covey, I mean, he's been on the team for a bit, like for a couple
Yeah.
seasons, but I wasn't expecting anything like this. He was, I think, top three in return yards and total return yards and average punt return yards like that. I mean, certainly deserves credit. I mean, for that special teams unit being probably the most consistent unit out of all three the entire season. Really, that's the one that didn't really falter at any point this season. So definitely deserves it. And hopefully they keep it up this coming season because special teams is definitely underrated and underappreciated at times, but um, definitely deserved it. And I forgot our punter also. It was also average. Like he was pretty solid, better than who did we have the year before? I'm blanking. I know his name. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Aaron
Aaron
Sulos.
Seabass, yeah, who was just absolutely horrible, but definitely got better without him. So yeah, credit all around, and Michael Clay definitely deserves it.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I've always been a fan of special teams in the sense of like good special teams can really shift the momentum of a game. And as the NFL kind of continues to move itself away from special teams more and incorporate rules to kind of limit the effects of special teams, like when you have effective special teams coaches and special teams play, um, I like to see it get rewarded because it can, there's three phases of a football game, and sometimes special teams is the one that's the most forgotten, but can have a massive impact on the outcome of games.
Yeah,
Happy to see that, and yeah, credit to the Eagles for getting this done as well.
yeah.
So that being said, let's move on to the Steelers a little bit. There's been some news surrounding the quarterback room, which is obviously going to, again, for it seems like the third offseason in a row, be the biggest storyline, which isn't necessarily what you want. Steelers kind of in a little bit of quarterback purgatory, but I'm going to hold off a second on getting to that. The first thing I want to start with is the NFL awards. And finally, after being nominated 6 times, Cam Heyward finally won the award for Walter Payton Man of the Year award. So he gets that nod this time around. And I mean, he's always just been a massive figure in Pittsburgh. I mean, he's involved with a lot of charities, whether it's cancer research, and he started a foundation when his dad passed. Well, it kind of in honor of his dad. His dad passed away when he was young, but he's just massive in the Pittsburgh community, and it's something that has kind of been a long time coming. And he finally got that award, voted on and given to him this season. So well deserved, and he deserves the shout out for that.
I mean, dude, one hell of a person. I mean, you could say what you want. He's really good on the field, but off the field, it's just an even better person, an even better human being. Like, I mean, just watching that speech, kind of gave me goosebumps. Seeing him emotional and talking about his dad and his mom. Just all the things that he's done and he's kind of done in honor of his dad since he passed away. It's just like, man, you just felt the emotion. You just like this dude's special, man. Like, it's just special human being. And he'd certainly deserve the award after crazy, 6 times being nominated for it. And yeah, man, it's a great story. Certainly deserved it. Leader on and off the field, man. The epitome of what you want a football player to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and they call it the most prestigious award in the sport for a reason, and he was absolutely deserving of it. He's been deserving of it, and for him to finally get it, I'm sure it was definitely a great, feeling for him and his family and everybody involved with his foundations. And just that he epitomizes what it means to be a Pittsburgh Steeler and kind of play in the city. So great to see him get it. Now, some other things that came out from the NFL awards, and I kind of expected this going into the night a little bit, was the Defensive Player of the Year award to go to Myles Garrett. I see it as a snub. Statistically, TJ Watt's the better player. You can talk about the impact the guy has on the field with, all these kind of advanced metrics. But at the end of the day, TJ Watt was the guy getting to the quarterback the most, disrupting the quarterback the most. It's like you can lean on analytics, but when it actually comes down to what this award is, given to, it's like it should go to the guy who is the most productive. I get that it's not necessarily something that you should base exclusively off of statistics, but at the end of the day, what are we talking about? It's the guy who led the league in sacks. It's the guy who was just as fundamental to the success of, his team's defense as Myles Garrett was to the Browns defense. TJ Watt on arguably a worse overall defense. And yeah, I don't know. It just felt like a snub to me. And it just seems like every year, TJ Watt, you could make the case he should have won 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards in his time in the NFL. And for him to only have one, and especially in this season when he was categorically better than Myles Garrett, to me is a shame.
It's criminal. I mean, it's just a straight robbery. Like, listen, Myles Garrett, I'm not discrediting him at all. He's a game wrecker. He's a great player himself. But the last 5 games of this past season, I know he was dealing with an injury, but I don't think he registered a sack, or at least it wasn't as productive as the games before.
Yeah.
And TJ Watt the entire season. I mean, everyone deals with injuries, but he was just disruptive. I mean, categorically and statistically, he was better in 11 of the major stats. Like, I don't know what these voters are really looking into. Like, it's just, to me, TJ Watt absolutely deserved it. Like, the stats were there, man. Like, I don't know, and I don't know if, like, I just don't understand it, dude. It
feels to an extent like the NFL really just wanted to get Myles Garrett this award because he's been a very good defensive player in the league for a number of years, and he was a former number 1 overall pick. He's kind of been a face of the NFL, I think you could say, to a degree, with his defensive prowess. But man, it's unfortunate, man. I don't know what voters kind of saw in it versus, him over TJ Watt. But man, it's like, what more does TJ Watt have to do to be deserving of this award, man? And he does it every single season that he's fully healthy. He's putting up these same numbers, and it was no different this year. And like you said, he was outpacing Myles Garrett in 11 different defensive categories. And he was the far better player down the stretch of this season than Myles Garrett was. In the final game of the year, TJ Watt got hurt and still registered 2 sacks in that game. And it just like to see him not get the award for how big of an impact he had with the Steelers. Like, it's hard for someone to argue that Myles Garrett has had a bigger impact on his team than TJ Watt when you look at how important TJ Watt was to the success of the Steelers, and he was statistically still better. Like, it doesn't add up for me. And it's a shame, but I mean, there's nothing else TJ Watt can do but just keep working and go after it again next year.
Dude, does he have to break the sack record to get the award? Like, what the hell? Like, what is? I don't understand, man. Like, I texted you the night of. I was like, "What? This is BS, dude. Like, he should have won it. He deserved it. It was very, very clear and obvious that he should have won it." And just, what? They would just like, we've had enough of the Watt brothers, like seeing them win.
I wonder if that's like kind of part of it, and people don't want to admit that TJ Watt is just as good as his brother was in his prime. I truly wonder if that's part of the case.
It shouldn't be. If that is, like, I honestly wouldn't be shocked because, I mean, again, deserved it. And in other years, maybe you could argue deserved it too. But I don't know, man. It's just getting snubbed of an award like that. It's just like, I don't know. Yeah, like you said, what else does this dude have to do? Like, he's just such a force. And I don't know, man. It's just absolute BS still. I'm still pissed about it now. And you know what? Hopefully he gets it next year. And I don't know. Like, I don't even know what to expect at this point with these voters. Like, what are they watching? Like,
Yeah. Who
seriously.
knows? They'll probably just hand it out to Micah Parsons at the start of the season next year before
Honestly,
anything
yeah.
even happens.
God damn. Like, seriously, man. But,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So that's enough of the awards. We'll move on to kind of the final part of this episode, talking about the quarterback room for the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is going to be for the third year in a row, like I alluded to, the biggest point of conversation for this franchise. And at least it becomes a little bit more clear what the Steelers are going to do next season. I mean, I don't think anyone was really surprised that this was coming, but Mitch Trubisky was cut by the Steelers in a kind of a cutting spree that also saw Chukwuma Okorafor and Presley Harvin also get cut. Frees up some cap space, but also kind of shows you what direction the Steelers are going to head for this season, which to me, the way I see it is they're going forward. Kenny Pickett is, currently the only quarterback under contract. And then it's just kind of be, I've always kind of said the Steelers should try to bring back Mason Rudolph and add another name to the room, whether that's another, veteran backup like a Jacoby Brissett or bringing in a 4th or 5th round pick in the draft as a quarterback. I think the competition is good. But to me, it kind of, sets the guideline that, hey, this is going to be Kenny Pickett and blank competing for the job. I think it's going to be a kind of a 2-horse race come training camp. And I think that the top priority is going to be bringing back Mason Rudolph. The Steelers have said that, they want to bring him back. When you look at the free agents the Steelers have, which obviously we'll get into that more in, our next episode when free agency is a little bit closer. But Mason Rudolph is the biggest name on that list. And he's going to be, the Steelers organization from the top down has said that he's a priority to re-sign. And if they do re-sign him, I don't know if it's really feasible to expect them to bring in any other sort of big name backup. But the big conversation, really this week has been the fact that it seems like a lot of players in the Steelers locker room, there seems to be some divide and some players that are really kind of on board with Mason Rudolph, getting, I don't want to say a leg up, but getting a really, fair shot at being the Steelers quarterback for 2025.
Yeah. I mean, you saw what he did when Pickett was injured and the last few games of the regular season. And, even against the Bills, I know they lost by 2 scores, but it's not like it was all terrible. And I mean, he was actually delivering strikes anyway. I mean, even when he was taking those big hits against the Bills, like just delivering strike after strike, they were back in that game. But I mean, just overall, I think you can make the argument that Mason Rudolph played better than Kenny Pickett at any point during the season, just based off stat. And he's just played with more confidence, I think. And the run game obviously is a big part of it, kind of building off that play action and things like that. And now it's even more, with Arthur Smith as your offensive coordinator. Now that's even like more like that's magnified. That's just, I mean, why don't you? I mean, I think the Steelers should re-sign Rudolph. That definitely.
I think they want to, for sure.
They have,
I think the question's more going to be, does he want to stay with Pittsburgh? And what are other teams willing to give him? Or is another team going to be outlandish and blow him away with an offer? I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case, but I think it's more that versus whether the Steelers want him back.
Right.
Because I think from the Steelers' perspective, he makes the most sense. Now, I will be fair. He did light it up the last, 3 games of the season plus the playoff game where he was the starter. Kenny Pickett only had 1.5 games before he got hurt without Matt Canada as play caller to really see the offense in a different light. So I would like to see these 2 guys back. So I guess the question more is, and I think Rudolph, as much as he's going to test free agency, also recognizes, the opportunity he has to return with the Steelers. But is there any organization out there that he would have perhaps as good of an opportunity to, get a starting job as he does with the Steelers this year?
I mean, the only real team I'd say maybe the Falcons. I don't know about the Commanders necessarily. Probably, yeah. I mean, really the Steelers, and plus you've been there for years now, and it's just like the city, the locker room, the players there, Mike Tomlin, obviously. And I mean, I don't. I think it definitely makes sense for him to stay in Pittsburgh, but then the other question obviously is like, well, then if they keep him, do they get any of these other guys like Justin Fields or maybe
Yeah.
Russell Wilson is probably going to get cut. Kirk Cousins, who's a free agent.
Let's get into that game in a second. But I think the one thing first is like with him and these other teams, and I'm just looking at kind of around the league landscape. Let me know if you think any of these teams, because I'm going to give you the teams that I think could potentially bring him in to compete for a starting job, and you tell me if any of them are. I'm going to give you the list that I think could potentially bring him in. Now we also got to remember this is a strong quarterback class coming out of the draft this year. There's a lot of guys who are going to go in the first round, but I'm going to give you the list of teams I think could be interested in him, and you tell me if he has a better chance of starting with any of them than he does potentially with the Steelers. Okay?
Yeah.
All right. So I think the Patriots could conceivably bring him in, given their current room.
Okay. I mean, potentially. Yeah.
Potentially. All right. I'll just go through it. The Commanders, who you listed.
Yeah, maybe.
I think the Minnesota Vikings, potentially, if they move on from Kirk Cousins, could potentially be intriguing. I could see the Atlanta Falcons, which you also mentioned.
Yeah.
I could see the Denver Broncos are interesting. I think they want to draft a quarterback, but like you said, they're looking to move on from Russell Wilson.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
I think the Raiders are interesting with their situation with Garoppolo and kind of a quarterback carousel last year.
Yeah,
definitely. And I think that's pretty much it, man.
You know, the common theme here with all these teams is they're all in a QB purgatory right now. So
yeah,
I mean, in theory, yes, he could have a shot at starting with any of these teams, but again, it's just like how successful do you think you'll be with the players in place too? Like, you know, the Raiders have Devontae Adams and a couple other players, but
and again, it's also really like
from
Rudolph's perspective, he knows the Steelers organization. He's been with them his entire career. Like, he knows the success he can conceivably have there. At the same time, it's like all of these other franchises that are looking for, you know, QB purgatory is the perfect way to put it. It's like any opportunity you have with them is potentially short-lived. Whereas, like with the Steelers, not only are you competing for the starting job, but even if you are the backup, you've seen that Mike Tomlin stuck with Rudolph even when Pickett was healthy for the playoff game. So, like, the organization and Tomlin isn't necessarily afraid to turn to Rudolph if they have to down the road. And then this kind of gets into the conversation that you alluded to. Well, it's like, what are the Steelers' options? Because, you know, I don't see them drafting a quarterback in the first round because they still have, you know, obviously Kenny Pickett for this season, and they're going to have to make a decision on his fifth-year option, you know, down the road here a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's like you need a quarterback that can be a legit competition with Kenny Pickett for that starting job while not completely, you know, bringing in somebody where, you know, there's a lot of guys that the Steelers have been linked to where if you bring them in, you're pretty much saying this is going to be our starter. Kenny Pickett, you know, is going to be, you know, taking a back seat here. We kind of fumbled the bag on that pick.
Yeah.
So I mean, we can go through kind of some of these quarterbacks and kind of what the ranges of options here. But do you get what I'm saying? Like Rudolph is that perfect quarterback where if he ends up losing the competition to Kenny Pickett, so be it. He can be the backup, and if the opportunity presents itself where you have to turn to him, great. You know what you have in him. But also, it's like he's still gonna push Kenny Pickett in training camp in a way that I think a lot of other quarterbacks aren't.
Yeah, I understand your argument definitely, but I mean, you've seen these two guys for a couple of years now. It's just like you know what you have in them, like you said. But it's like, do you do this? I mean, I know the Steelers aren't really the kind of team that will go out and get a quarterback. That's not really how they work. So, I mean, that to me is probably what's going to happen. But I mean, some of these names, it's like you have to find them somewhat appealing. Like, I mean,
let's talk about some of the names. I mean, so the thing, we'll start with Justin Fields because obviously you'd have to trade for him.
Yes.
I just don't know if it's feasible because then you're bringing in another quarterback who, I mean, at that stage, what you're going to have to give up for Justin Fields, he's going to be the starter. You're not going to give all that up for a quarterback competition and then just hand it to Kenny Pickett. Like you're bringing in Justin Fields to be the starter and you're punting on Kenny Pickett, which again, I don't think the Steelers fully want to do. I'm intrigued by the possibility of Kirk Cousins because I think he's an upgrade over both of these guys. I think he kind of fits the, you know, kind of conservative mindset of the Steelers organization to a degree. It's a little bit of a smaller market, which we've seen he's comfortable in. I think it could potentially work, but again, then you're also fully punting on Kenny Pickett, but that's an upgrade that I think could work. Russell Wilson,
No,
intriguing,
no.
but like I just don't know if that's the move right now for this organization.
See,
Because
the
again,
thing with
you're
that,
fully committing. If you bring in Russell Wilson, you're fully committing to him. And again, Kenny Pickett is going to the back seat a bit. And there's still a lot up in the air about what, Russell Wilson really is at this point. Now, I will say he did thrive
yeah,
most of his career in that play action type offense up in Seattle with Marshawn Lynch under Pete Carroll. But that's a move that just doesn't really make a ton of sense to me right now.
right. I mean, and the thing I'll say about that is you also would just have to wait because I mean the rumors are that he's going to get cut.
Yeah.
And I mean, who knows when that really is going to happen? Like that could be June 1st for like a post June 1st designation, for all we know. And at that point, it's like you would rather have your QB competition like kind of figured out, like who you want in the room. Not necessarily who the starter is, but you know what I mean. Like you'd rather have that room sorted, so you know who's competing for the starting job. But like then I mean, because the Broncos have to eat that salary regardless. So I mean, you could probably bring him in for relatively cheap because the Broncos will still be paying him. Um, that's again a waiting game, and I don't know if you really want to do that because. And you talk about Russell Wilson's personality, is sort of like almost too stoic, not very, doesn't really connect with other players, sort of thing. That you kind of have to factor all that in. But I
Yeah.
wouldn't go that way anyway. But it's certainly interesting. But I
So
just
so to me, I mean, those are kind of the three names that like you bring them in, you're giving them the starting job. It's like that's not there's going to be no competition there. They're all going to be viewed as like what you're going to be bringing them in for and what their kind of status in the league warrants and what you potentially have to give up for someone like a Justin Fields. They're going to be the starter. Like and I don't see anything Kenny Pickett could do to really change that.
right. How
Now
about
the interesting conversation. Well, you say the name that you have in mind.
I don't know if you're about to say it, but Jimmy Garoppolo potentially, even though he has that suspension and the Raiders are expected. I mean, they're probably going to cut him too. You
Yeah,
could bring him in theory. You would just have to, wait for his suspension, his 2 game suspension or whatever. But I don't know if that could be an
Jimmy
option.
Garoppolo isn't a name Jimmy Garoppolo isn't a name I've thought of at all. So that's interesting you bring it up because I really haven't thought of him in that light. So I don't know if he would fit more into the previous category I just said of guys you'd bring in and immediately give them the starting job, or guys you'd bring them in and compete. So this is the next name I was going to get into, and you tell me if Jimmy Garoppolo is closer to this guy. The next
Mhm.
guy that I'd kind of put in that category of maybe with Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph, to me, like I said, is kind of the ideal candidate of being able to push Kenny Pickett and compete for the job while also
Yeah.
sitting as the backup if he loses out. The other veteran that I see kind of fitting that mold is Ryan Tannehill.
Right.
Given
Right.
his status in the league, I don't think he would come in and you would give him the job um, over Kenny Pickett. I think he could compete. And given Arthur Smith being the new offensive coordinator, Ryan Tannehill won Comeback Player of the Year, had his 2 best statistical seasons with Arthur Smith as his OC, throwing for a combined 55 touchdowns over those 2 years, I believe, if I'm correct off the top of my head. 1 year, I think he threw for 3,000 yards. He would kind of be that guy in the Arthur Smith offense that I could see being a quarterback battle and a veteran that could push Kenny Pickett. I don't know if Jimmy Garoppolo fits into that same, kind of category, because then the next category down from the Tannehill and the Rudolph category would be guys like, Jacoby Brissett or
Right.
a, Gardner Minshew or a,
Carson Wentz.
Josh Dobbs, guys that would come in and they would compete, but really, the job's going to Kenny Pickett.
Right. That's true. Oh, man, I mean, Ryan Tannehill definitely makes the most sense if you're not going to bring back Rudolph. Because, I mean, I don't think you're going to bring back Rudolph if you bring in Tannehill, right? Like,
No, I
this
think
guy.
it's one or the other.
Right. Okay. So I think it probably goes one of those 2 ways. I mean, the only downside, I guess, is Tannehill's injury history or like the last couple
Yeah.
seasons. That's the only real concern you have there. Because, I mean, like you said, he had his best 2 seasons under Arthur Smith as offensive coordinator. So, I mean, that to me Yeah, makes the most sense. It's probably the safest
Yeah.
second safest behind Mason Rudolph, um, that you have, because then you're not giving anything up. You're just signing him for whatever amount of money, and it's probably also a 1-year deal. Like, I mean, yeah, and it is good competition for Kenny Pickett too. It's similar in that sense of, like Mason Rudolph, sort of same pool of competition. So I think that it's definitely one or the other, and it makes the most sense financially.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I
So
think it works.
I'm in agreement with you that like ultimately at the end of the day, like my list of what I see happening is like one, bring back Mason Rudolph and bring back Mason Rudolph, have him compete for the job. Number two is Rudolph walks or another team gives him a dumb amount of money the Steelers don't want to match, or he just
Yep.
wants out of Pittsburgh and they bring in Tannehill. And then the third most likely option is they're unable to land either. And again, this is a distant third. I think it's going to be one of
Yeah.
those two guys. Distant third would be they missed out on both of those guys. They're going to go and, bring in a Jacoby Brissett or a Josh Dobbs
Yeah.
or some other backup that's going to compete, but not really compete. The job's going to be Kenny Pickett. And they're, at the end of the day, just going to be the backup. And it's going to be Kenny Pickett's quarterback job for this season. And I think that ultimately, that's those two, one of those two options is one of those three options is going to happen. But the way that Mike Tomlin's been talking, I think he still sees something in Kenny Pickett, and just the way this organization operates going into year 3, knowing that you could potentially have this guy for a fourth season and then a the 5th-year option as well. I think that they're going to try to make it work with Kenny Pickett, and that's what makes either a Mason Rudolph or a Ryan Tannehill so appealing, in that they can push him while also still, trying to have Kenny Pickett win the job. The one other possibility that really intrigues me is the Kirk Cousins route. But if you bring him in at 35 years of age, and let's say you sign him to a 2 or 3 year deal, you're bringing him in knowing the Kenny Pickett era in Pittsburgh is done,
Yeah.
and Kirk Cousins is our bridge quarterback for the next, 2 to 3 years. We're going to try and win with him as the quarterback and with this core of Minkah Fitzpatrick and TJ Watt and, a budding wide receiver group. We're going to try and win with this core now with Kirk Cousins and try to do it running the football and using play action. And that's the route you're going to go. And if it fizzles out after 3 seasons, that may lead to a rebuild down the road.
Right.
But that's kind of those are kind of the options I see unfolding, with the most likely being a Rudolph or Ryan Tannehill, re-sign or signing into Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I just kind of think about it from a player's perspective. I mean, you think of like TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick. We've touched on this before. Not to say that they're wasting these like prime years, but again, if it doesn't work out, that's another year. They're another year older, and it's just, I don't know. It's just not maybe I'm not saying the clock's like ticking, like the clock's running
No.
out, but like again, it's getting closer though to that point where it's like they will start declining, or they'll
Yeah.
eventually become a free agent and what
And
and
I
all
think
this
that's
sort of stuff.
the big argument for signing a Kirk Cousins or trading for a Justin Fields is that, one of my favorite sayings from Colin Cowherd that he says is, I'd rather give up on a guy maybe a year early or give up on a coach a year early
Right.
than a year too late and
Yeah.
have it waste another prime year of the rest of these guys' career. I mean, TJ Watt has yet to win a playoff game in his
Yeah.
career with the Steelers. Like, you can wait another year on Kenny Pickett, and if we get to next offseason and he's not the guy, and Mason Rudolph is a good quarterback but not going to get you over the hump, the Steelers are going to be potentially resetting with another, quarterback in the draft, or trying to land next year's version of Kirk Cousins or Justin Fields. And it's just going to be a year later with Minkah Fitzpatrick and TJ Watt and Cam Heyward closer to retirement, and all of a sudden needing to pay some of these wide receivers and,
Yeah.
just
That's true.
a bunch of things that, you can keep kicking the can down the road, but eventually the Steelers have to make a splash at the quarterback position, or Kenny Pickett's got to find that next level, or else like you said, like the career of some of these star defensive players are going to be wasted.
Yeah, the other thing I forgot to say is the quarterback class this year is one of the best in recent years. Next year is just going to be horrible. Like
Mhm.
it's going to be
Yeah.
like that Kenny Pickett sort of draft class again.
Yeah.
So you have to factor that in too. Like you can't just kind of wave off these quarterbacks from this year.
Yeah.
I'm not ruling that out either. Like I feel like the Steelers could potentially draft someone, but I don't know. There's a lot you have to factor in, and you kind of just hope that it works out one way or the other. Because again, you don't want to be in this situation again next year where it's just like, all right, gotta think about who our quarterbacks can be. You know, the same. We don't want to have the same conversation next year. Like you would
Yeah.
rather have it figured out for once. It's like it's been
100%.
a few years now that
You
they've been.
you agree it's completely fair to say right now the Steelers are full on in QB purgatory?
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say so. Yeah, it
Okay.
sucks. Yeah, but it's
It
just
sucks.
it
It
is.
sucks, but
It is a QB purgatory right now.
yeah, I mean, unless Kenny Pickett can figure it out or they make that big splash, it's gonna stay that way.
Yeah,
Because even if they bring back Mason Rudolph and he pushes them, it's like, what's the ceiling, you know? And
yeah,
as nice of a story as it may be, if Rudolph figures it out and becomes a competent quarterback you can win games with, like you wasted the first round pick on Kenny Pickett, and it's really just feels like a major reset and just kicking the can down the road until eventually you have to find a guy that can be at that next level.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's they can't afford to do this again. Like it just can't, man.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely going to be a pivotal offseason. And I'm sure we're going to be talking about the quarterback room plenty of times until, the conclusion of free agency and the conclusion of the draft and we get closer towards next season. This is going to be a big conversation point of the offseason.
Probably the biggest out of both our teams, really. So
Probably.
yeah.
Probably.
Oh
Sounds
boy.
good, man. Sounds good. Well, it's been a good episode, and we'll be back most likely not next week, but the following week, talking about free agency expectations, positions that each team should target, and kind of the most important players that are currently free agents on the roster for each of these teams to try and re-sign. So until we come back next time, you got any final thoughts?
Nah, man. Let's hope for a good offseason. Let's just say that much.
Yeah, man. All right, sounds good. Well, until next time, we'll see y'all then. Peace out, everybody. Bye-bye.